Picture this. Families waiting in endless lines for a single meal. Businesses shuttered on every street corner. Life savings vanishing overnight. This wasn't some distant nightmare, this was America in the 1930s, living through an economic catastrophe so severe that its shockwaves still influence policy decisions today. When the First World War concluded in 1918, America emerged victorious and optimistic. The nation's factories, which had churned out weapons and supplies, pivoted to civilian goods. A cultural revolution was underway. Women who'd worked during wartime remained in the labor force, cities pulsed with energy, and a sense of limitless possibility filled the air. Enter Henry Ford and his revolutionary vision. In Detroit, his assembly line methodology transformed automobile manufacturing. What once required skilled craftsmen now flowed through specialized stations. The Model T's price plummeted. Suddenly, ordinary families could afford personal vehicles. Other industries took notice and replicated this approach for refrigerators, phonographs, and countless household appliances. Credit became widely accessible. Banks, eager to capitalize on consumer appetite, extended loans liberally. Why wait when you could own it now and pay later? This philosophy spread like wildfire. Wall Street became the nation's darling. Between 1921 and 1929, stock valuations multiplied sixfold. Neighbors discussed portfolio performance at dinner parties. Ordinary citizens became amateur traders, convinced that prosperity would continue indefinitely. Margin trading amplified this frenzy. Investors could control stocks worth 10 times their actual investment, borrowing the difference and betting on continued appreciation. When you only need to put down 10% to control an asset, spectacular gains become possible. So do spectacular losses. Beneath the champagne optimism, structural weaknesses festered. European markets, devastated by war, couldn't absorb American exports. Agricultural prices sagged as overproduction met reduced demand. Manufacturing output began declining years before the crash, but stock prices kept climbing, detached from economic reality. President Herbert Hoover, inaugurated in early 1929, declared poverty nearly conquered. Few questioned whether asset prices reflected genuine value or mere speculation. October 1929 shattered the illusion. On the 24th, Black Thursday, panic selling triggered a massive sell-off. The following Tuesday brought worse devastation. Within weeks, valuations had plummeted by 1/3. Fortunes evaporated. Those who'd borrowed heavily faced ruin. But here's the critical point: the market crash was a symptom, not the disease itself. The real catastrophe unfolded in the banking sector. Thousands of small, independent banks had lent aggressively for stock speculation. When markets collapsed, these institutions became insolvent. No deposit insurance existed. When your bank failed, your money vanished. Panic metastasized. Even sound banks faced runs as terrified depositors demanded their funds. In New York, the Bank of the United States, its official sounding name misleading many into thinking it was government-backed, collapsed after a rumor-fueled run. Its failure destroyed hundreds of millions in deposits and triggered cascading bank failures nationwide. Ultimately, 1/3 of American banks closed their doors permanently. 9,000 institutions gone. 9 million savings accounts obliterated. As banks failed, the money supply contracted dramatically, shrinking 31% between 1929 and 1933. This deflation proved economically toxic. When money becomes scarcer and more valuable, consumers hoard rather than spend. Businesses slash prices and cut workers. Those with debts watch their burdens grow heavier in real terms. A vicious cycle takes hold. The Federal Reserve, which could have injected liquidity, largely stood aside, a decision historians now recognize as catastrophic. President Hoover, despite his earlier optimism, proved unable to arrest the decline. In 1930, he signed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, raising import duties sharply to protect American producers. Retaliation came swiftly. Dozens of nations imposed their own tariffs. Global commerce, already weak, contracted by 2/3 between 1929 and 1934. Meanwhile, environmental disaster struck. Years of intensive farming had exhausted prairie topsoil. When drought arrived, winds lifted this depleted earth into massive dust storms, the Dust Bowl. Agricultural communities, already struggling, faced complete devastation. The statistics are staggering. Unemployment peaked near 25%. Industrial production halved. The Dow Jones lost 90% of its value. Shanty towns, mockingly dubbed Hoovervilles, appeared in every major city as families lost their homes. 34 million Americans had zero income. Breadlines stretched for blocks. The psychological trauma ran deep. An entire generation learned to fear economic insecurity. Franklin Roosevelt's 1932 election brought dramatic policy shifts. His New Deal programs attacked the crisis on multiple fronts. Social safety nets emerged: minimum wages, unemployment insurance, Social Security, overtime protections. These provided immediate relief while establishing lasting frameworks. Banking reform included deposit insurance, ending the era of devastating bank runs. The Securities and Exchange Commission brought transparency and oversight to financial markets. Government spending increased substantially, funding infrastructure projects that employed millions while building roads, bridges, dams, and public buildings still used today. Did the New Deal end the Depression? Economists debate this vigorously. Unemployment remained stubbornly high throughout the 1930s. Only when World War II began in 1939, requiring massive industrial mobilization, did joblessness finally drop below 10%. What's undeniable is that the Depression reshaped economic thinking. Several principles emerged. Moderate inflation is preferable to deflation. It encourages spending and investment rather than hoarding. Central banks must act decisively during crises, providing liquidity to prevent system-wide collapse. Government intervention can stabilize failing markets and provide crucial safety nets. Financial regulation serves vital protective functions. The Great Depression wasn't inevitable. It resulted from specific policy choices, institutional failures, and the collective psychology of boom and bust. Speculation detached from fundamentals created unsustainable valuations. Inadequate financial regulation allowed dangerous practices. Policy mistakes, inaction by the Federal Reserve, protectionist tariffs, transformed crisis into catastrophe. The scars ran deep, but so did the lessons learned. Modern economic policy, from deposit insurance to counter-cyclical spending, directly reflects this painful education. When the 2008 financial crisis struck, policymakers drew explicitly on Depression-era experience, acting aggressively to prevent banking collapse and deflationary spirals. History doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. Recognizing the patterns, unsustainable speculation, inadequate regulation, policy paralysis, helps us identify dangers before they metastasize. The Great Depression reminds us that prosperity is fragile, that markets can fail catastrophically, and that the choices we make in crisis define whether we face recession or depression. The question isn't whether another crisis will come. It's whether we'll remember the lessons paid for so dearly generations ago.